Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre. Today on the show, Lincoln Michel, short story writer. It's interesting. When I Googled Lincoln, it came up short story writer. But you know what? He's not a short story writer anymore. He's now a novelist. And we will be talking about his debut novel, The Body Scout, which is absolutely superb. And I just learned before going live that it was selected by Esquire magazine as among the 50 best sci-fi novels of all time. The Body Scout is amazing. It's unapologetically cyberpunk. It's a techno detective noir story. And what I found most interesting for me, it's the second novel with baseball in it, baseball at the center, in fact, that I, as a non-sports fan, and frankly, someone who really doesn't understand baseball, absolutely enjoyed. Obviously, the other novel with baseball is Underworld by Don DeLillo, which I highly recommend. But anyway, let the camera let's have the camera zoom around a little bit and show us the setting for today, because we are on a baseball uh, field here, surrounded by bleachers and strange little containers here with fluid in it, and brains going in and out, up and down, I should say. Ears. There is a in the corner there is the upper body of a baseball player, and I believe the name of this baseball player is a Spare Zunz. Now, you don't know what a Zunz is. We will find out with Lincoln in just a little bit when we bring him in. Um, these are all little sort of artifacts that happen in the story. We also have sky caps flying around and drones. The story is full of not only baseball but also biotech, really annoying Silicon Valley libertarians. The topic is a lot about body enhancements, but also about disability. Those are the topics that I want to address today. And one of the characters is actually here with us. Let's see here. Where is it? Dr. Zetek. Now, Dr. Zetek in the story is a very talented a bio, I don't know what he is, a surgeon of sorts, and he has his upper body enhanced with legs, with cybernetic legs. We didn't have them available, so we gave him these crab legs. But anyway, in Lincoln's story, The Body Scout, it's a lot about how to enhance your body, how to modify it, how to um, optimize the body, primarily to advance in life and business and so on and so forth. So that's the story, and we will find out what Zunz is. Oh, by the way, here on the table, we of course have the books, The Body Scout from Orbit, but we also have another Zunz, a botched Zunz, came out a little bit like I don't know, like a little squid with a baseball cap of the Monsanto Mets. So I think you'll get the gist. I'm trying to be spoiler free here, but this Zunz character, possibly, I'm not confirming or denying it, is maybe cloned here and there, and well, mistakes happen. We learn from mistakes. Anyways, big welcome to Lincoln Michel. Very, very happy to have Lincoln here on this very last show, actually, before the summer break. Hello, Lincoln. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. And let me just say again that the entire set here, I don't know if set's the right term, but is
Oh,
completely
yeah.
amazing.
That's a legit term. Sometimes we call it venue, but yeah, a set. Yeah. You're a part of the set too. Uh, what is up with you? What required this avatar, this embodiment, this digital embodiment?
Well, yeah, the book, as you were saying, is kind of largely about biotech and body modification, basically like a kind of cyberpunk book where the cyber part is focused on the body instead of virtual reality. And so I figured, I don't know, a kind of grisly body horror body with cybernetic arms on it seemed apropos. I really love how it turned out. The hat, I think, seals it.
The hat, let's zoom into the hat. Those are the Monsanto Mets. The Mets, sponsored by Monsanto. All the baseball teams, of course, are sponsored by a big multinational monopolies. I mean, this is, I guess, a staple of the cyberpunk genre, that everything is completely corporatized. But you take it up a notch with this. And oh, let me also tell you, Lincoln, if you click on your awesome baseball glove, you can also change your posture if you like. You just click it, and then a little window comes up. Dr. Setek is looking at you from behind and going like, "Does Lincoln not know how to change his position? What is going on?"
Yeah, I remember when we were when I was doing that before in other seats, but for some reason I'm having a hard time with the posture change here.
Ah, let me see if I can do
But
that
I'm
for
probably
you.
just doing it incorrectly.
No, no, you look fantastic. I just meant if you wanted to. You look super cozy and relaxed in there. Now, the enhancement thing um in your book, the body, I mean, this is a big topic of mine in Second Life, obviously, with digital bodies, digital embodiment. And my stories are all about how empowering it can be to leave the physical body behind, to invent and inhabit a new body. In your book, there's it's what I really love about it is there's a whole slew of people with different reasons for changing their body. So it's not only for optimizing and advancing in your career, but also in one case, there's a character who is deaf, and obviously you can just get new ears, plug them in, and boom, there you go. But also, the main character is addicted to this type of modification, right?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is definitely one thing I wanted to do in the book was show a variety of ideological and personal reactions to this technology. I think, a pet peeve of mine is when you read science fiction and some new technology is introduced and everyone adopts it universally in the same way, whether it's like utopian or dystopian. And I
Mm.
think that, technology never works that way, right? Some people adopt it, some people reject it, people use it for different purposes. And so that was kind of yeah, definitely a major thing I wanted to explore in the book. So yeah, sometimes the body enhancements are a really empowering thing in the book, and sometimes there's something that people want to avoid to not erase their identities. And then and other times there's still this kind of corporate control and capitalism ruining it for most people.
Uh, the I was gonna throw up this actually. Let's talk about this here real quick, because this is a quote from an interview uh, uh, where you talk about that you had this story. This is something that I like to ask every author actually before we start about COVID. And this is a quote from you from an interview, I believe, with Kim Stanley Robinson, conversation, where you say, "I got the idea for this book many years ago. I started writing it in earnest in 2015, submitted it in February 2020, right before COVID hit. So everything in the book about pandemic and healthcare inequality and corporations getting rich off advanced medical treatments came before COVID. So it was prescient in a way." So, like you were saying, I mean, technology is implemented by people in different ways, and it can be beneficial. And I want to get into that, the whole tech will save us or tech will not save us, a little bit later on as well. But it's I mean, this kind of defining the genre as well, right? I mean, the cyberpunk is supposed to be kind of a warning, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the timeline there is accurate. I started the book a long time ago, and I well, books are books tend to take many years to write for most people, most writers I know. But I finished it in February of 22, and we sent it out to editors that month. So I really did think that the book was never going to get published, because a month later, it was COVID lockdown, and who knows what was going to happen to the world, right? I mean, I guess we still don't really know what will happen.
We still don't know. I've been
Yeah.
booking the book club ahead 2023, and I'm telling people in the email, if the world still turns, the book, if you could commit to this book club in 2023 July. Yeah. No, go ahead.
But yeah, so it had been finished before COVID hit, and so all the stuff about pandemics and corporations kind of biotech pharmaceutical companies having a lot of power because they've helped combat pandemics while also, causing them in other ways. All of that stuff was baked into the project for years ago. So not that I'm going to say that. I don't know. I guess it was a nice coincidence. No, that's
Mm.
not the way to phrase it because there was nothing nice about what happened. But uh, yeah, that
No,
was all.
absolutely. But what I'm saying, I mean, this stuff is obviously not new that corporations or multinational corporations are kind of calling the shots on this, and the impact, as you also describe it, with all the benefits of combating shortcomings, and repairing the body. uh, for me, the net outcome is frankly negative. I mean, here we're talking about exploitation at a level in your book, and I'm careful sort of stepping around, not spoiling stuff, but we're talking about yeah, we're talking about exploiting workers at a level that is sort of has not been seen before. And there's always this joke, and I don't know where I first heard it, but uh, the techies in Silicon Valley, or the people who run some of these corporations, they sometimes look at the material that you and your fellow sci-fi authors put out as an, I think Cory Doctorow said it, as an instruction manual and not a warning. And obviously, I mean, if you read this, read your book here, The Body Scout, and you go like, wait a minute, yeah, it's cool that I can fix my deafness or my blindness, but wait a minute, they can clone me and use me as a human telephone? Hello? No.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the kind of thing I guess we'll have to check back in 10, 20 years and see how dark it's gotten.
Are you hopeful about the future? Actually, a related question: do you feel that sci-fi and maybe cyberpunk as a subgenre is still a valid way to put out social critique, or is that not even your goal? I mean, I think it would be very legitimate to say, "Hey, I want to create really great entertainment that is relevant, but I want to create a fast-paced, which you did, novel that is just sort of unput downable." I mean, what kind of goals do you have with this kind of material?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I mean, I hope the goal is all of those things. I mean, I definitely think that cyberpunk, broadly speaking, and that kind of dystopian science fiction in general, is maybe more relevant than ever. There's a way in which, like, I feel like maybe pre Donald Trump and pre some of the other horrible developments of the last couple, the pandemic and the kind of conspiracy theories about the pandemic and all of that. Before that, maybe there was a way that it felt like this kind of critique was too, I don't know, blunt or something. But now
Hmm.
I feel like, actually the most prescient political thinking that I ever encountered was like 1980s punk rock lyrics or something. Like
Mm.
the corporations are only getting more powerful. People like Elon Musk are starting, companies to put chips into people's brains. And how can how can it not be relevant? The kind of cyberpunk critique.
I completely agree with you, but I hear a lot of people say that I heard an interview with a German big name, Klaus Frick. He's a managing editor of a sci-fi series here in Germany, and he said, some of the stuff is being surpassed by actual technology. He's making kind of a slightly different point. His issue was, yeah, some of the stuff is really surpassed by technology. He was talking about The Circle, Dave Eggers, which I think is an awesome book. I don't think that stuff is outdated at all. But his point was like, because of the speed of technology, the stuff is not relevant. I completely disagree with that, because I think the social critique is always relevant, as we are in have been since the eight or earlier than the 80s, in sort of a corporate takeover of every corner of life, call it neoliberalism, whatever you want to call it, right? But because I mean, that still makes those stories very relevant.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do think it's also true that there's a way where it's technology does move so fast that it's hard to feel like you're satirizing something when what you satirize becomes true, 5 days later. But that doesn't mean it's irrelevant as a critique, I don't think.
Hmm. Yep. Let's see here if we get. Oh, here on YouTube, Kitten Duo says, Lincoln Michel, I really like your avatar. Well, I related this to you, Lincoln. People love your avatar. People also, I think, maybe love that you eat popcorns and now you're on a laptop.
Yeah, I couldn't find I couldn't I couldn't find the switching around positions, but I got a menu of various popcorn eating came up.
This is unbelievably rude. The guests just eating popcorn and then they're on.
Well, there's a
The,
button here that says share popcorn, but I think maybe I need someone in the seat with me for that to work. I think I'm just feeding the emptiness right now.
um, Now let's start off with a little taste of the book. Here, the Second Life Magic. A book stand will appear magically from underneath the earth. Here it is. And if I could ask you to stand up and carefully walk towards this book stand without falling, getting hit by a drone. And here we go. Very good. Oh, this is a small little book stand here. I got to make this one a little bigger. But you are in a perfect position. Here, the book stand magically got bigger. There you go. And now we'll hear a little bit from the very beginning of the book, where we get introduced to the narrator, Kobo, who is a baseball scout, a player scout. Now, briefly, what is for the Europeans? What is a baseball scout?
Oh, well, I mean, in real life, a baseball scout is just someone who goes looking in the minor leagues, or I mean, not more like youth players, right? College players and stuff, scouting to see who's someone that the professional teams want to draft, right? So the same thing happens with in soccer and in I think every sport, but in baseball, there's like more of a tradition of baseball scouts. You see them more in movies and such. In my book, it takes place in a future in which the baseball leagues, well, actually all of the sports leagues, are run by massive biotech and pharmaceutical corporations who use the sports basically as loss leaders for their products, right? So if the
Hmm.
Monsanto Mets win the World Series, then maybe people are going to go buy Monsanto steroid injections at their local futuristic CVS.
Hmm.
So in that context, the baseball scouts in this book are sometimes they scout players, but often they scout scientists who will be hired by these biotech companies.
Right. So they concoct the stuff that's sort of behind the base. So the main character, his job is to actually headhunt other people, well, including maybe players, but really kind of the whole ecosystem of that operation.
Yeah, exactly.
Real quick before you start, you dedicate this book also to Kobo Abe. Who was Kobo Abe?
Oh, Kobo Abe was a fantastic Japanese author. Often I hear him called like the Japanese Kafka. He's kind of a surreal writer, but one of my favorite writers who really inspired me. So I figured I'd name my name character after him.
That is awesome. I love this, and I have Kobo Abe on my list now. The to be read stack is getting higher, so this is awesome. This is from the first chapter. Now, the Dark Hour. Sorry, you can read in a second, but I also no. I have one more question. I love the chapter titles. Just real quick, did you decide on having chapter titles early on? Um, are you a fan of chapter titles? Why not one, two, three, as some people do it? I mean, I love these chapter titles. I would prefer chapter titles, but I also understand why authors just don't have chapter titles. But so why did you choose to have chapter names for those chapters?
Yeah, I enjoy it. I like just having kind of fun writing, right? Like what's the point of writing if you're not going to have too much fun? And I just thought they were fun to do. I did Me and my editor definitely debated whether we should remove them or not, and eventually we decided to keep them in the chapters but remove them from the table of contents. So,
Mm. Ah,
but I think their primary purpose, other than me having fun, is just to give a bit of a that hard-boiled noir vibe, so to speak,
yes.
to each
That's
chapter.
the vibe. Exactly. Exactly. So the edit so I guess then the argument against that would be that they give too much away or something or
I think it really just comes down to preference there. I know some writers who just hate the idea of chapter titles, regardless of what they are. but I always have fun with them. I like them in other authors too.
Okay, now let's get to the reading. I'm sorry, I'm just too curious. Here is Lincoln Michel reading from The Body Scout. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So when I couldn't fall asleep, I counted the parts of the body. I used the outdated numbers, what they taught me back in school when only the ultra rich upgraded: 206 bones, 78 organs. The separate pieces floated through the fog of my mind, one by one, like strange birds. If I was still awake by the end, I'd think about everything connecting: miles of nerves and veins snaking through the pile, tying tibia to fibula, connecting heart to lung, muscles, blood, hair, skin, everything joining together into a person, into me. Then I swapped in new parts: a second cybernetic arm or a fresh lung lining for the smog, cutting edge implants, this season's latest organs. I mixed and matched, tweaked and twisted. I didn't know if I was still getting myself to sleep. I might have been keeping myself swimming in that liminal ooze between waking problems and troubled dreams. It was a state that reminded me of the anesthetic haze of the surgery table, like my mattress was a slick metal slab and the passing headlamps were the eye lamps of surgery drones. Outside, the world went by. Construction cranes hoisted buildings tall enough to stab the clouds. Cars cluttered the skies, but inside, my senses dulled, the world was gone. I was alone and waiting to wake up as something different, better, and new. I'd been piecing myself together for years, with surgeries and grafts, with shots and pills. I kept lists of possible procedures, files of future upgrades that would lead me to an updated life. My brother, JJ Zunes, always laughed about it. One day I'm going to wake up and none of you will be left, he'd say. That would have been fine with me. We're all born with one body, and there's no possibility of a refund, no way to test drive a different form. So how could anyone not be willing to pay an arm and a leg for a better arm and a better leg? Sure, we're each greater than the sum of our parts, but surely greater parts couldn't hurt. Each time I upgraded, it was wonderful for a time. I had new sensations, new possibilities. I was getting closer to what I thought I was supposed to be. Then each time seemed to require another time, another surgery and another loan to pay for it. 2 decades of improvements, and I still wanted more. But now I had 6 figures in medical debt, crushing me like a beetle under a brick.
And that's Lincoln Michel reading from The Body Scout. Thank you, Lincoln. You can sit back down and munch on the popcorn. Matter of fact, Sai said earlier in the chat, he has no focus. That is so post cyberpunk. So this introduces us to Kobo and Zunes, and yeah, forgive me to mispronounce him. I thought it was Zuns, but Zunes is the other main character, the brother, if you will, of Kobo, and here he Kobo talks about his relationship with his body parts, and I just brought up on the board behind us a little additional excerpt from the book where Zunes, who is a star, he is a player, a huge star for the Mets, for the Monsanto Mets, while Kobo is, well, quote unquote, just a scout. Um, and Zunes here does a lot of charity work. This is a little excerpt where the sports commentators talk about what Zunes does with these body enhancement. The news was now talking about Zunes' charity work. Young children waved foam fingers and wept outside of a rundown school. The Met star, who grew up in the Ebbets subsidized subterranean apartments, was known for his work with the Nobody Left Behind Fund. NBLB works with international philanthropists to provide physical and cerebral upgrades to low income New York City school children. Talk a little bit, Lincoln, about those. I mean, the tone here is just brilliant. This is an example, obviously, that we all know of. I don't know, whitewashing, greenwashing that big corporations do with their philanthropy work, right?
Yeah, I mean, and well, I also when you were reading that, it reminded me of you brought up the subterranean housing
Oh,
complexes.
yes, right. Everything is sunk. Yeah, talk a little bit about the setting in New York in your world there.
Well, I think to the question of like cyberpunk critique or kind of science fiction critique. For me, at least, a lot of what I was just doing was really extrapolating or hyperbolizing from the real world, right? And maybe that's what you always do when you do this kind of satire. So in New York, we have this thing. I think it was actually ended pretty recently, but for a long time, New York had something where when they would build these new development buildings, they would have subsidized apartments that were given to low income people, but because the rich people didn't want to really interact with low income people, they would have separate entrances made for the people who had the subsidized apartments. It was called like
Mm.
the poor door. And so I was like extrapolating from that and imagining a future in which the poor subsidized apartments are literally underground.
But it's also there's some environment, you don't go into it that much, but there's some environmental, obviously the future with the climate crisis also has resulted in some apartments kind of being, or some housing being underwater.
Oh well, and it's taking place in a future in which the sea levels have risen so that some of Manhattan is drowned, but those apartments are not occupied in
Hmm.
the book. They're occupied by certain people who are outside of society, right? Certain
Hmm.
unhoused people and maybe people who are rebelling in a certain way, but they're presumably occupying the apartments that are still above water while the bottom levels are underwater.
Now this is actually quite brilliant. See, I didn't even pick up on this because I was not aware that with the subsidized housing, that developers basically then they fulfill the requirements. They're building the stuff, but they're building it again, sort of segregated, as you say, within the same development, right? I mean,
Yes, yeah,
ridiculous.
right, but ridiculous and sad, but also true to our present reality, at least here
Oh yeah.
In America.
Oh, the present reality is completely ridiculous. Uh, Speaking of which, I recently found out, Lincoln, that you also, I guess, are a fan or an appreciator of the book Infinite Jest. Infinite Jest is one of my favorite books, and I'm just going to throw up here this slide that Shyla prepared of real covers of David Foster Wallace's 1996 novel Infinite Jest, and fan covers. There's like tons of them out there on the internet. Fans making covers, and without knowing this, Lincoln, because you tweeted something and I go like, oh, maybe he's into Infinite Jest. I got some Infinite Jest vibes. From your book, I mean, the kind of the tone, the humor, also well, I mean, it's a sport here at the center. I do want to ask you, why actually baseball? Is that significant for the story to move forward, or how did you arrive there? But first, the Infinite Jest about sports, your humor. I see a relation there. The theme of addiction to body modification and all this kind of stuff. The sadness that's inherent in modern life. All that kind of stuff is in your book. So two quick questions: am I correct in the assumption that that you think Infinite Jest is one of the important contemporary novels, American novels? And if so, pretend I am one of those guys who thinks that Infinite Jest is just for pretentious 20-year-old guys having it in the shelf to impress the ladies or whatever, and sell it to me as something that is maybe worthwhile going through like 1,500 pages after people buy your book. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Of course.
well, I did like Infinite Jest, and I'm sure it had a major influence on me. I did read every single word, every single footnote. So I may have been a pretentious 20
There's
year old, but I
300
did read it.
pages of footnotes, folks. It's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite nuts. I hadn't actually really been thinking about Infinite Jest when I was writing, but I don't think you're wrong at all that there's certainly a lot of overlap there. The combination of kind of what was it James Wood called Infinite Jest hysterical realism, that kind of a
Ah.
hysterical realism that I think he meant it as a pejorative, but I actually kind of like the term, where all these different elements of society, from the high and the low and pop culture and quote unquote high culture, are all kind of jumbled together, and the tone of the book can encompass all of them, which is something I think David
Yeah.
Foster Wallace was always really brilliant with, right? He could talk.
Exactly. The tone you're spot on. The fact that he was able to combine all this with this tone and just it remain coherent. It's remarkable. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a writer of novels. I write other stuff, but it's just amazing. And that those kind of vibes are somehow, I guess you absorb those and then you kind of put that in there some. I mean, that's what people do. You absorb things and then they come out in other ways.
Yeah, and it's always like a big jumble, right? I mean, when we had our test run, you took me to a Jonathan Lethem set, and his early novel, or his first novel, Gun with Occasional Music, was definitely another book that I think influenced me when I was writing this one. And
Hmm.
it's all in the back of the mind there, right? Like I read both of those books when I was in college. I didn't reread them to write this novel, but I'm sure they both influenced me a lot in a kind of subconscious level.
A very quick aside, here's a little slide. I used to read Infinite Jest 1 hour per week in virtual reality world Sansar back in 2017 with my Oculus Rift headset on and with my avatar, my blue Dragon Drax avatar. I was reading but I only got until page 250 because the ratings the ratings went down from 9 viewers to 2, and one of them was me monitoring my own reading on YouTube on the other screen, so I gave up. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. I think it's an important book that people should read, and don't be afraid of the size. Use it in chunks, but it's very enriching. And I think really important. But anyway, let's do another. Oh wait, no. Before the question, why baseball, Lincoln? Baseball, the significance of baseball to this story. I mean, couldn't you have used other things for? Again, I'm not spoiling, but people can sort of glean from from what we're talking about that we're talking a little bit about possibly cloning and such.
Oh, I think absolutely you could have used a different sport, and maybe it would have been smarter for me to just for like the
But did it
global
have to be a sport
market.
even?
No, it didn't have to. I mean, my impulse was to write a kind of cyberpunk book that focused on body modification. And for me, the sports seemed like an obvious entry point into those kind of larger questions. I think,
Hmm.
you definitely don't have to be a fan of baseball to like the book, or even to watch,
Absolutely.
to watch baseball to like it. It's kind of the background of the book, I think, more than the present. But yeah, you definitely could have come into this story from different angles. I think for me, baseball, well, I thought of sports because I do think of sports are kind of on the forefront of a lot of these questions, right?
Yep.
Uh, you know, Even right now, all these debates about, what can happen in the Olympics and what drugs are allowed, and all the debates about, trans people in sports. This is where a lot of these debates happen, right?
Absolutely. And
Which I
also,
totally support for.
I mean, I just want to add. I mean, it's included in your answer, but let's just say the capital, the end sort of the version of sort of end stage capitalism is visible, arguably most in sports as well, because the exploitation of the players. This is also something to keep in mind, and you hint. I mean, it's part of the story actually that the earning capital of even major players. I mean, this is a very short window where they're being sort of pushed through like a racehorse, and from the player's perspective, they have to be cognizant of that. Or I mean, the world is full, not only baseball, but of players who have maybe I don't know a handful of years of superstardom, and then they're washed out, and there's absolutely nothing unless they start some sort of franchise operation or whatnot in terms of their brand recognition. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you completely. And then I mean, I don't know, sports tie into so many things that I was kind of just, thinking about. And also the way that billionaires kind of jockey with each other and buy up sports teams as a kind of, bragging rights. And so, yeah, so I don't know, I thought about sports as an entry point into these larger critiques of society and philosophical questions and all of that. And then baseball for me, I guess there's probably just three reasons for it. One reason is just that there is like a nice, rich literary tradition. You brought up Delillo's Underworld, and there's lots of other great books, and there's even great I don't know, pop culture stuff that pops into my mind with baseball, like the classic Simpsons episode Homer at the bat. And so that was kind of fun
Oh,
to think
yeah, yeah,
about.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And but also I grew up in the 90s in which the steroid scandal in Major League Baseball was just a major topic. And I remember reading all the kind of debates there where people would be like, well, sports are about human excellence, and other people, not about chemistry. And other people would be like, well, players, we get new medicine every year, we get new treatments in hospitals, new medicines. How is that
Right.
any different? And those kind of questions were just, I associated them with baseball just from the 90s, I think, with Mark McGuire and Sosa and Barry Bonds and all of that. But and then the third reason is a little more pedestrian, but it's just that baseball works really well from a dramatic point of view because so many of the matchups are kind of one on one. It's a hitter versus a batter. The dramatic stakes are kind of very clear. uh, I kind of prefer basketball as a sport, but it's a little
Mhm,
more
mhm.
chaotic to describe on the page. So those are
Mm.
kind of why I went for baseball.
Stella says here in the local chat, if you lose your arm in baseball, the overstressing of the arm, your career is over. Well, not in Lincoln Michel's Body Scout. This is the Second Life Book Club. If you're just tuning in or if you're just hopping here in World, yeah, this is the last show before the summer, and it's just a wonderful, amazing guest with a wonderful book. Almost the best book club related that I read this year. Not quite. It's up in the top four. I would say. Let's see how the year progresses, but I was just informed that we are actually full. Um, we're full in the region. We're trying to up the number of avatars that can come into the region. So please try again if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to come in World. Um, Ruby is bringing that up right now. But one quick thing, Lincoln, what was really interesting to me when we lived in California and my son grew up there. What I did not understand is how important it is, why parents were so obsessed with their kids' performance in baseball or other sports, primarily baseball. And please explain to our international audience briefly why this is so important. I mean, it's tied to access to higher education. Again, we touched on earning abilities, but it's really the ticket into for many people, uh, frankly, yeah, to higher education.
In America,
Yeah, with sports scholarships.
yeah, I would say, I mean, sports in general. I think it happens a lot more maybe with football and
Yeah,
but yeah,
sports in general. Sorry, I should have said that. I don't mean baseball. I meant what I found interesting or very strange at first when I first came to America, and then my son was born, is the obsession with parents' obsession with their kids' performance in sport and the way they push them into sports with in a very unhealthy manner.
oh yeah, I mean that definitely can happen. For the record, not what happened with me. I was like too lazy to play many sports, and my parents didn't. They tried to make me do one in high school, and I think I did track for 1 month or something, and then quit. But I do like playing pickup basketball with friends, and all of that. But yeah, no, what you're saying is totally true in America, where college can cost so much, and college is still sold, whether accurately or inaccurately, as like a ticket to the middle class.
Hmm.
Definitely lots of people are really pushed into sports, especially dangerous sports like football or American football, where you can get concussions. It can have really lots of lasting problems. But yeah, there's a lot of that where you're pushed into that as a means to getting an education, and then ideally as a means to, or sometimes as a means to get into professional leagues too, obviously.
Professional leagues or yeah, or because I mean, I agree with you 100% about the verdict is out of higher education is in fact a way to this to the holy middle class when you get out of college with an amount of student that you can't make any
Right.
type of move. Um, I have one slide here, a very brief excerpt, talk about what we were talking about earlier about sports in America. It's time for Americans to come together, pick a side, and hope the other guy gets his ass kicked. So again, I mean, that's not that different in Germany. You pick a team, but I just found it so funny when you wrote this in the book. So this sort of summarizes I don't know, the American way of life is you pick a team and then you stay on that team and you just hope the other guy gets his ass kicked. It's applicable to politics and everything
Well, yeah,
else, right?
when you put it up there, it sounds like my personal philosophy, but
Oh
I
no,
think
it's not.
in the
No, no, no.
in the book it was the president who says that, right? So he's like throwing out the first pitch in a baseball game or
Right.
something and says that.
Well, I don't know, Lincoln, if that's, that's your surrogate, Mr. President Newman in the book. Who knows? I don't know you that well. That might be your opinion. But yeah, absolutely. So that kind of sentiment is expressed wonderfully. Let's go to a second reading. There's a question on YouTube. Is the book only available in the US? I like to buy books in a bookstore. Has it been translated to German or Spanish, published in Germany or Spain?
Sadly, no. I would absolutely love for it to be translated more. I have an edition coming out in Turkey actually soon.
Wow.
It hasn't been translated to German or Spanish, sadly.
That
If
is
any
really
any translators
that
are watching, get in touch.
that is so fascinating. I mean, this obviously has to do with the kind of market research that the publisher does, right? But why does the publisher think, or why do you think the publisher has data on Turkey being interested in the book?
Oh, I mean, I think there was just a Turkish publisher who is running a science fiction series, and they picked
Ah,
this book along with several others. So I think that'll
ah.
come out next year, maybe.
Paradise here makes a point here, same in Europe with soccer, about the obsession with sports. I would say the only difference is because higher education in Germany or in most European countries is still not as expensive. That the ticket into that world of universities for most people is not tied to sports scholarship or being recruited um, through this route. I guess that's sort of the main difference. Now we're going to read. What are we reading? Would you like to set up the excerpt here? Where are we in the story?
Yeah. Do we still have time for two more excerpts, or? And I'm asking
Absolutely.
only. Okay. Well, then I'm just. This next excerpt takes place. Well, I guess so. This is a very plotty book, and I don't want to bore anyone with a lot of plot details. But the the one major thing that happens is after the first excerpt that I read, the main character's brother, who's the star player for one of the baseball teams, dies kind of grotesquely and somewhat mysteriously while at bat in the middle of the game. And so Kobo tries to track down the killer. It's a kind of noir plot. And so he's not literally a detective, but he's in a kind of detective role.
He's a
Th-
forced detective. He's forced to become one, I guess.
yeah. And in this excerpt, he's been doing some investigating and then is kind of dropped off in a futuristic Penn Station, which is a big hub in New York City, where the old train station was. And yeah, it's just a little section of kind of world building. So I thought it would work without knowing more of the plot. So
I
he's just
have one
hanging out.
question.
Yeah,
What are erasers? Kobo keeps sort of, well, he's smoking the erasers. What are those?
yeah, the erasers, and I think they do come up in this excerpt. Erasers are just a kind of anesthetic cigarette. So
Mm,
kind of playing around with the noir trope of the always smoking detective, but in this body modification sci-fi world. So it's basically an anesthetic cigarette. It kind of dulls his senses when he smokes them.
right. Let's go.
All right. So the Penn Station hub towered over me. It was composed of gigantic steel and glass arches and a central hub of tubes that spilled out in different directions. I could see them above me, snaking out toward the rest of the city, like the station was the dark heart of the city, pumping blood to every distant limb. Outside was a buzz of activity, too. I pushed past a group of protesters projecting slogans in the air, some about this war or that one, others about the last election or the next one. A group of new Buddhists chanted by a levitating taco truck while a line of people waited to drop their blood into temp vendor stations to see if they qualified for any job openings. A thin man walked by with a placard flashing info on an ill uprising protest happening later that day. He caught my eye and raised his fist, saying it was time to start the revolution. Isn't it always time? I said. But this time it's really the time, comrade. I bought two lab grown taco tongues and a double hydration water. two lab grown tongue tacos. I ate on a bench while staring at a wall of screens cycling through the channels. The baseball news was just about the opening game of the World Series, what lineups were projected, who was injured, what the odds were at the bookies, and, more accurately, what the odds were at the stock market. Investors were betting on the Sphinxes, and Monsanto's stock had tanked 4.3% since Zunes was killed. Otherwise, the world had moved on. In the NNBA, the plethora Suns had just acquired Maximus Diggs for a half dozen lab prospects. In entertainment, the lead story was Stanton Doon severing both of his legs for his latest movie role. The limbs were being put in cryopots, and the talking heads were assuring fans that they could be reattached when shooting finished. Dune was a Hollywood star known for extreme body modification, taking intravenous lard to beef up for a sumo biopic, then working with a team of gynochemists to shrink his bones down to 15th century levels for a three-part historical epic on the War of the Roses. I act with every part of my DNA, Dune told the reporter. Overhead, a plethora emporium blimp floated like a gigantic airborne grub. I checked my Byte wallet, tried to calculate how many days I could last on the number it displayed. I was constantly checking numbers, reopening my accounts and spreadsheets, hoping some magic of math had changed them. Now, like always, I was exactly as broke as I knew I'd be. I did have enough to buy a cyber patch kit, his arm has been injured, and another pack of erasers. A few seconds later, a drone shaped like a pelican fell out of the sky, my purchases in its pouch. The drone was covered in plastiflesh and feathers, but it was designed with Disney in mind. Gigantic eyes and a smile carved into the bright yellow beak. It was caught in some grotesque tug of war between machine, flesh, and cartoon. I figured the animal shaped trend was nostalgia, a pining for the biodiversity we'd lost. A lot of the national parks had even purchased animal drones to roam around the hills and geysers, letting tourists pretend the wilderness was still wild. Personally, I disliked the pretense. I hoped the chrome robot style would make a comeback soon.
And this is Lincoln Michel reading from the Body Scout, now out from Orbit Books, and here's some texture of his excellent world building. You were talking about plot heavy. Let me reiterate that as a reader, I appreciate a tightly plotted book. I also appreciate large meandering stuff like Infinite Jest. We already covered that one, but your book is very tightly plotted, and it reminded me of a book that was very popular. You made into a movie, and everybody asked me, "Did you read the Ready Player One?" Yes, I did. I read it many times. Um, I mean, this is not about winning a medal or whatever, but frankly, I like your book much better. The reason why I even compare the two is because with Ready Player One, it was also pointed out that the pacing is really good, and I have to acknowledge the pacing of Ready Player One is very good, but your pacing is as good. Plus, the subject matter to me is more relevant. And but anyway, talk a little bit about the pacing. Do you have a good? Are you very self confident about your pacing when you write this, or who helps you? Check your check the reality if you're like too conceited about your own ability in that regard.
Oh, well, that is. Oh, first of all, that's a very flattering compliment for me because no, I do not. I do not think I'm good at plotting. I come from more of a quote unquote literary fiction background where the focus was really on sentences and
Hmm.
atmosphere and stuff like that. And I feel like there's things I'm very good at. I think I'm pretty good with dialogue and some other aspects, but plot pacing is something I really felt I had to teach myself from scratch from to write this novel. You mentioned before that I had a book of short stories out, and so I'm used to writing short stories where plot is not as much of the focus. So it was definitely something I really had to teach myself. And yeah, I'm
You
very glad it came
succeeded.
across.
Yeah, don't get please talk to us again when you're like, oh my God, Drexter said I'm good at plot. Well, the pacing is really great. Jerry McNally says here in a local chat, the intravenous lard. He likes that. I have a question about, because also Jonathan Lethem, who I proudly call a friend of the show. He was here a few times, and I love Jonathan Lethem. Also blurbed your book saying fizzy and brilliant. I devoured it. The interesting thing, in this excerpt, you mentioned the new Buddhists. They're running around there. Um, the Edenists are an important group there. Um, I would call them, I guess, fundamentalists, anti-tech. They try to go back to the roots of how they define life. Unfortunately, they have this fundamentalist tinge. So me as an anti-capitalist, I was reading this, go like, what group would I join? I couldn't join them because they're just too ideological. But in this hellhole of all-consuming end-stage capitalism, where do you go? And Jonathan Lethem has similar themes in The Arrest and also Feral Detective, where he's quite critically looking at these sort of intentional communities. Now, the Edenists in your book, I don't know if I would call them intentional community. Like I said, they're very ideological, very hardcore sort of. I mean, they're almost like pro-lifers in a sense. Um, so they combine all the bad stuff, but but they're anti this sort of established capitalist dogma. So I guess my question is, where would you go? What kind of group would you create to kind of get out of this capitalist hellhole in that world? I mean, you wouldn't join the Edens. Would you join the new Buddhists?
Well, I probably would just be a kind of cynical guy on the outskirts like Kobo. That's
Ah,
probably why he was my protagonist. But yeah,
smoking the erasers and like, fuck that. No.
yeah, well, it's kind of like, I was saying before that I really wanted to try to show different ideological and personal reactions to the technology in the future that I was exploring. And so yeah, the Edenists are there part as a kind of extreme rejection of the norm. And they're kind of like a mix of environmentalists, leftists, but then they're also kind of quasi Christian religious. So
Yeah.
they're kind of a hybrid of those two things. I mean,
That kind of hybrid, that is very problematic for me because yeah, as a progressive or lefty, when it's combined with those other things, I find myself at odds with them.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I definitely have like sympathy towards them, and there's a
Yeah.
kind of offshoot of them that are more of a radical group, a kind of Weather Underground type version of the Edenists. I grew up like really into the punk music scene with all those kind of politics and intentional communities, and the Edenists are not. I would not call them punk rock exactly, but they're maybe closer than some other groups. So I
Right.
definitely like sympathize with them, but I agree with you too that they have a ideology that I would not subscribe to.
It's difficult. I mean, I hope I don't come across as a purist here. We had an appreciation of the late Michael Brooks last week, and we talked a lot about that kind of stuff. And he was able to kind of, bring people together. Anyways, I don't want to get sidetracked too much, but that's such a fascinating little part of the book that just keeps you thinking about, where would I be? I mean, how and you just do a brilliant job of just throwing that in and laying out their opposition to that world, the Edenists, and then the reader can see where would I fit in, or what is my prescription. Somebody pointed out, Ginger pointed out, what the hell happened to Jared? Our avatar Jared is now called Coppelius, and if I could ask the camera to zoom a little bit into Coppelius, and Coppelius is in a business suit, I guess. Is that a business suit? Very old school. But he's also a Neanderthal. And I recently learned, Lincoln, through On the Media, which is a great show out of WNYC. Highly recommend On the Media. It's a weekly show on an NPR program. that Neanderthals always got a bad rap, and they did not only just hit each other over the head with an axe, but they're actually quite advanced. So Neanderthals play a very important role in your book, I think. What did you learn when you researched that the Neanderthals, and why Neanderthals?
Well, actually, when you're talking about like groups that I relate to, I probably like feel the closest relation to the Neanderthals in the books.
Yes, me
Without,
too. Exactly. I was actually gonna that is such an awesome plot also towards the end. It was like, hey, I'm gonna go with those guys.
yeah, I don't know if we would be able to join them if we're not Neanderthals ourselves,
That's right.
but
That's
yeah,
right. We don't have the bona fides to enter that club. God damn it. Yeah. No, no, go ahead.
but yeah, oh, yeah, I mean, certainly the Neanderthals were like a real. I mean, as far as we know, right? That they were as advanced as humans, or as Homo erectus, and were just killed out, or maybe not killed out. I feel like some of the research is now thinks that maybe it wasn't that humans killed them all, and that maybe some other things happened. It's all kind of up in the air. But it felt, if I'm exploring how the human body is going to be controlled by capitalism and advanced technology, it felt like another useful counterpoint, like the Edenists who kind of reject it all, is to imagine a Neanderthal group that aren't exactly human, but are
Yeah.
close and have their own kind of oppositional relationship to the technology.
Yeah. That is the Neanderthals. Yeah, just fascinating. Something I wanted to touch on earlier, now I remember, is of course every cyberpunk story needs to have really obnoxious. I think I did mention that obnoxious Silicon Valley executives, and you don't disappoint. Um, there's a guy, Peter Coyne, who is mentioned, and I wonder, Peter Coyne. I mean, Peter Thiel comes to mind, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, any number of these people. But I want to read a little excerpt here that I put up on the board here. Um, it's condensed a little bit, but here Kobo talks a little bit about his youth with Zunz when they were hanging out. When Zunz and I were freshmen, they defrosted the first cryo case. Some tech baron named Peter Coyne from Silicon Valley, way back when it was a valley and not a man made libertarian island in the tax free international waters powered by floating mini nuke plants. Peter Thiel's wet dream. Coyne had been an eclectic billionaire who'd used government subsidies to buy up NASA and turn it into a commercial space cruise line. What are you going to do, Mr. Coyne? I'm going to the next future. They say you only live once. Well, I like to think outside the box. I'm going to disrupt mortality. That's just brilliant. Disrupt mortality. Anyway, um, very fun writing. I
Well,
guess you had
I think
fun.
you're quite right that Peter Thiel is probably who I was thinking of there with his injections of blood, youth blood, right?
And then you throw us off the trail when you mention NASA, and you go like, is it Musk? Is it Bezos? Peter Thiel, for people who don't know him, he actually is. I don't know if he was born in Germany, um, but maybe he was born in America. But he actually speaks German. Frankly, I have no problem saying that Peter Thiel is quite nuts. I mean, you be your own judge. Check him out. Check out where he stands on the issues. And I don't want to say anymore. But let's go to the next reading here, and this is where we are being introduced to someone also you mentioned before, the owner of the team, also someone who is really not doesn't have a sports background. Just why do I mean, uh, what do you think why they buy it? I mean, you said it earlier. They buy it for prestige. These teams like these billionaires.
Yeah, I think it's part of that, dick measuring contest or whatever the
Yeah.
billionaires have. I actually, as we've mentioned in this book, the sports teams are owned by these corporations, so they're all named the Monsanto Mets, or there's a bunch of made up corporations in there too. Um, and that was one of those things that I was like, oh, this is kind of a satirical point. And then a friend of mine who is a little more familiar with Japanese culture was like, oh, did you know that there's actually two billionaires who hate each other over in
Hmm.
Japan who bought up rival baseball teams, and they're Yeah, and the teams are the Rakuten Eagles and the SoftBank Hawks. I might have it might be the SoftBank Eagles and the Rakuten Hawks.
Oh
I'm not
my God.
But yeah, it's like these two billionaires who famously hate each other, and they have baseball teams that use their corporate brand name. So yeah, another point where satire is hard sometimes.
Well, see, but I mean, I didn't know that that reality has caught up with this. But yeah, this is why they do it. It's a big measuring contest, and my baseball team is bigger than yours. Although mine is called SoftBank. That's weird. But anyways, this excerpt introduces us to what's his first name? Derek Mouth, also called the Mouth, and I think that he wants to be called the Mouth, right?
Yes.
So he is the billionaire owner of the Monsanto Mets. And please go right ahead. This is Lincoln Michel reading from the Body Scout.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he's going to visit the mouth. Yeah, I don't think you need to know anything more than that, except what you just said. Yeah, he's the head of Monsanto, the CEO. The mouth was sitting in an enormous wing chair at the back of a massive room. The walls were lined with nude golden statues, living tissue, flesh sculpted in recreations of Renaissance paintings, Madonna and Child, Venus trembling on a gigantic marble clam. The sculptures moved slightly and erratically. They were just flesh, no brains or nerves. Tubes on their backside pumped in nutrients and electrical currents. The biosculpting was equal parts impressive and disturbing. The fingernails needed trimming, and a layer of dust was drying out the skin. They hadn't been cleaned in a while. When I looked closely, I thought I saw smudged handprints along the rumps. You like them? The mouse said, leaning back behind his gold encrusted desk. Imported from Milan, cost a fortune, believe me. The mouth was gold too, or at least a dull yellow. He had a napkin tucked into his unbuttoned collar of his French cuff shirt. The napkin was a good idea. A little archipelago of ketchup stains had formed on the silk. I sat down across from him, tried to look relaxed, pretended sitting in a room where the chairs were worth more than my entire life was no big deal. Behind the mouth, two people sat sporting blank expressions, the Neanderthals from the sushi restaurant. Natasha wearing a doctor's coat over her leopard print suit, and then a big squat man built like a refrigerator in a black tailored suit. He had the same Neanderthal features as Natasha, except they were all smoothed out as if his genes hadn't bothered with the details. The mouth waved a hand without turning around. You've met Natasha, my executive assistant. The gentleman in the corner, don't even worry about him. Capellius is our liaison with the Department of Human Limits, government stuff. Nothing concerning you. Neither of the Neanderthals spoke, although Natasha gave me a little wave with her big hand. The mouse spoke, though, nearly tripping over his words. This is a mess, very bad. I don't like it. I don't mean the burger. The burger is fantastic, beautiful. Have you had one? They call it the mouth burger. We'll be serving them in the stadium. The chefs who cook them up are scientists. Literally. You've never tasted a burger until you've tasted mammoth. You'll feel like a caveman chomping on one of these. Give me a spear right now, I'd stab a dinosaur right through the lizard's skull. Ha ha. He had a greasy, wet laugh. It sounded like it was dribbling down his chin. Never had mammoth, sir. We've got 'em all. Mammoth burgers, teriyaki tyrannosaur wings, saber-tooth hero platters. Those cocksuckers thought they could avoid being eaten by going extinct. Bunch of buffoons. Didn't count on human ingenuity. We can eat anything these days. Eat the past, present, or future. It's a wonderful time to be alive, I said, tucking my injured hand into my pocket to hide the sparks. You know what I love about caveman times? The mouse said. Everything was giant back then. Massive animals, huge trees, a time for heroes and ogres. Now dinosaurs have shrunk to little lizards, cold blooded dorks, pathetic. I thought they evolved into birds, I said. Birds, lizards, whatever. Dinky pieces of shit either way. My point is, they used to mean something. They used to inspire terror. You ever pee your pants at a sparrow? Of course not. We're bringing the scary ones back, though, in burger form. He took another bite and groaned with pleasure. That's the stuff. A rivulet of grease dripped down his cheek. His mouth was huge and wide. I'd heard it had been surgically extended about half an inch on each side. When he smiled, I could see all the way to his molars. The burger I like. The thing with Zunes I don't like. Hate it. He was a heck of an investment. I like juice squirting out of my burgers, not my players. You understand. I pulled back my lips into a straight line, pretended it was a smile. Yeah, I understand. There was a freegull in the cage next to him, beak pecking on the wire. It hopped like a frog, but when Monsanto put a bit of meat through the slot, the squawk was all eagle. Monsanto had created the freegulls on a government contract for Newman's midterm election campaign. Newman had warned that changing climate was killing off the patriotic species, and it was time for new splices that would, quote, eat up the foreign fauna spreading through the homeland. Now, the government was selling them in collectible editions to help pay off the Franco German debt hounds. Look at this. A creature that didn't exist until last year, eating a creature that went extinct millions of years ago. The mouse spread his hands, smiled with his extra wide lips. The future. We're growing the future in Monsanto Labs. Where were we? And I'll stop there.
Absolutely awesome. The Body Scout, Lincoln Michel reading here, and this was the mouth, introducing us to the mouth. I have another excerpt that I pulled where I really loved from the book here. The mouth saying, "This is the mouth talking, not you or the or Kobo." Uh, the point is, I didn't have anything except these brains. I'm a little bit brilliant, maybe smarter than the scientists we have on staff. Sometimes I go into the lab and tell those eggheads, and they look at me like I'm Einstein. You ever heard of Einstein? He was a big deal back in the day. If he was alive, he'd be working for me if I let him. I mean, that's really over the top, Lincoln, but it's also really accurate. Because these people talk like that. I think. I mean, I heard people talk like that. Um, myself and another point of the book, I think the mouth also says, I came from nothing. I only got what's that, like 100 million from my parents trust fund, but I came from nothing in one sentence, unironically. So
Yeah, I think that part I probably stole from Donald Trump when he because he had that part when he was like, I had nothing. I just had a $2 million loan from my father or something like that.
that's right. But Mitt Romney used to say something like that too, right? Like, oh yeah, we had no money. Anyways, let's not get too sidetracked with these buffoons here. um we have 20 minutes left. I have a whole bunch of more questions. First of all, big thanks to Kitten Duo, who's a big fan here. Is She's on YouTube. Uh, Kitten, thank you for supporting this show. This is a volunteer-driven effort. I say it every week. We're sponsored by Linden Lab in the sense that we get these islands for free. We have 3 islands. We might get a fourth island after the summer break, but this is not a commercial endeavor. This is an operation where I felt as a reader, I want to bring the joy of reading to the Second Life community, and it's working. Today we're completely full. We get full almost every week. So today there's a bunch of people who are messaging and they can't get in. Um, we're trying, so please keep trying. We're opening it up for more people. But anyway, big thank you, Kitten, and everybody, and I'll acknowledge the team at the end of the show. Now, real quick, Lincoln, behind us is the Janus Club. There's an entrance to the Janus Club. So after the show, this is actually a teleporter. People can walk through it and they will go to the Janus Club. Now the Janus Club, whoa, there's stuff going on. On the other end of the baseball field is Pharaoh's Dive with an Anubis-like avatar as the bartender. So I give the camera a little time to kind of cam over this. Dr. Setek is back. Dr. Setek, I think, is taking a drink at Pharaoh's Dive. Um, Kind of an important spot in your book, or the concept of what the Ferris Dive is, but even more important, the Janus Club. And without going into too much detail or spoiler, there's some sexual things going on in the Janus Club, possibly the safest sex that's possible, right? I mean, is that what you kind of were thinking of? Because I mean, it's actually quite fascinating. So don't spoil it. I mean, you can if you want, but what went into this concept? What's happening over there at the Janus Club?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of like the creative process or whatever, for me, part of the joy of writing in genre fiction, which I love genre fiction, I love science fiction, I guess obviously I wouldn't be publishing a book on orbit, but part of what's fun is like figuring out how you can use tropes and expectations and then subvert them in different ways, right? And a lot of what happens for me in the book was trying to kind of triangulate something between science fiction, the kind of noir, hard boiled voice and plot of the book, and then a kind of body horror critique that's going on. And so the Janus Club, I think, kind of hits all those things. I think
Hmm.
a lot of hard boiled noir kind of books or movies have the weird sex club. And so I went for a kind of sci-fi body horror version of that
Now let's
without
just
spoiling it.
Right. Let's just say for the Second Life audience, we all know I reported on this. I actually did a movie for German public television back in 2011 about virtual sex in Second Life, where we portrayed the sex king, Stroker Serpentine, um, who made millions of dollars with Second Life sex objects and things. Just imagine if that were somewhat possible in the real world, then I guess you get to what's going on with the Janus Club. But if you really want to know it, I'm a really good book salesman, Lincoln, am I not? You have to get the Body Scout, or you just go after the show. You go through the teleporter into the Janus Club and see what happens over there. Now, another thing that we talk about, and it's important in the book. One of the serious things is really the kind of the eugenics and race science bullshit that is frankly bubbling up every I don't know 10 or 15 years in the real world. So I mean this the President Newman uses the technology to pitch America for the Americans, um, and all this kind of stuff, all these kind of concepts of one race ethnicity being culturally superior to the other one, all this nauseating bullshit. And a matter of fact, today I had a conversation in the park when I was walking my dog with a guy, an older guy who I had a great conversation with. But then he starts talking about, yeah, well, some people are just culturally inferior, and no offense to them, but we got to be keeping our people sort of separate from them, or we dilute them. And it's just so shocking to hear these kind of things in that people are think it's okay to utter these things in a casual conversation with a person you just met. And right, I mean, it's unbelievable. And you touch on this in the book as well, so I'm just bringing this up just as a comment, how
Well,
terrible
yeah,
it is.
I mean, I obviously I agree with you, and yeah, in the book, I think it's not a huge part of the book, but in the background, the Republican Party, the Conservative Party in the book's future, and also in our present, is increasingly allied with kind of far right fascist racists. Yeah, which is again pretty much just the reality right now, I guess, and sadly in America and in other parts of the
In
world.
the world, this
Yeah.
stuff is there's a flavor, each of the national flavor.
Oh
But
yes. Well, yeah, obviously Orban in Hungary was just had to gave a whole speech about how he hates race mixing or something ridiculous, right?
the we're talking about human interactions, sexual interactions. We're also talking about the human telephone, um, that is happening in the book. And wait, I have a slide here prepared. Where is it? Because what I found so funny is that in one part of the book you talk about that technology, that the technology is flawed still, and as a Second Lifer who would love Second Life to be absolutely glitch free, which it isn't. I just had to like laugh at that. Here's the excerpt. It wasn't perfect tech, that was for sure. Oh, this is actually about the Janus Club. There was lag between thought and movement, between neurons and nerves, and there was resistance throbbing in the space between that pushed back on me. I guess that's what philosophers called will. Still, I couldn't deny I felt alive. I guess what you mean by will is to kind of will it into perfection, although it's kind of not perfect. I think every Second Lifer knows that feeling where we pretend it's perfect that the glitch is not happening.
Well, yeah, in this case, he's he's kind of remotely controlling another person's body. So the will
Hmm.
there is quite literally the other person's consciousness or brain pushing back on the control.
Hmm. Hmm.
Again, we're getting slightly into spoiler territory, but that's some
Oh,
of
okay, okay. I got to be careful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lincoln, just tell me, shush. Don't go into that.
oh, it's more just that the explanation would probably take way
Oh,
longer
that's right.
than it would
Yeah, 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 yeah.
serve the the audience.
Okay, then I'll bring up this one here, which I love because money means a lot when you're in debt. You know that. That's what Zun says. He's the rich baseball star, as you remember. But no, it's a lot bigger than you and me. He's talking about the technology. These clones could change everything. Think of the possibilities. People can buy a second body, live a whole, and here comes second life. And now that's why this book needs to be purchased by every second lifer because it has the word second life in it. Of course, it's not capitalized. I'll forgive you that, Lincoln. I will call Orbit. Uh, a second life, a third, a fourth. It could change everything. So, yeah, just awesome. Um, where was I? Where's my notes here? Sci-fi. Yes, we talked about still relevant. Yes. Oh, here is a collage prepared by Shyla. Just two pictures. The Shea Stadium, old, the Mets Stadium, and the new one is the City Field. Are you a Mets fan?
Uh, yeah, I like the Mets. I grew up in Virginia, which doesn't have any professional sports teams at all, actually, and the closest baseball team was in a fair bit away. So when I moved to New York, and I've been here in New York in a long time, I, picked New York sports teams to root for. So the Mets are who I go see when I go see a baseball game.
Here is something that our researcher Monkey brought up, a quote from you. And Monkey did all the research for this week. People know that we separate the task. I read the work, and then I think about the work and what I assume the author wants to tell me with this work, what I think of the work, and I'm trying to discover the author through the work. I intentionally do not, outside of the basic biography and the back catalog, I do not listen or watch other interviews of authors. But the research team and this week, Monkey, she does that, and it's a wonderful combination actually to then bring the author and the work to you, the audience. Here's a quote from you: disappointed optimism might be a really accurate description of my mindset. I don't know if I have the most hope about the future, but I definitely believe hope is an essential human quality and that the future is very uncertain and we have to fight to make it what we want to be. Giving up really only helps the powerful, the forces that are making things worse and worse. I really love that. I identify with this wholeheartedly. I told the guy in the park today that every morning I do this little uh, semi-Buddhist thing where I say, I'm not cynical. I'm not cynical. Yes, people are kind of dumb sometimes, but I'm not cynical. I'm not going to give up on humanity. Kind of like that, right? I mean, elaborate a little bit on this way to kind of cope with the madness. Maybe you can give us some hope.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can provide the I don't know that how to deal with our current reality, but yeah, I guess I think that's true. Like I said, I grew up really into like the punk music and that kind of scene, and I have always kind of felt that the system is bullshit, to so to speak. But at the same time, like if you just accept that it's bullshit and don't try to fight it, you
Yeah.
know, it's only helping the system too. So I don't know. It's kind of like I want to
But
go
you're
take.
making a very good point because I think also, I mean, a lot of other people have pointed this out, like through the the collapse of capitalism and then accelerated through the pandemic. A lot of people were really sort of, it's a cognitive dissonance where they didn't, I guess, it didn't compute with them because they bought into this from very early on, and they go like, wait a minute, this stuff is not working. Wait a minute, the shelves are empty and this is not even communism. What's going on? And what you were saying, I can relate to that in the sense that I think I never really bought into this, although I grew up fairly well off, middle class. And a lot of my peers and people, when I went to my high school reunion, there's a lot of people who have, not really peaked outside of their own sort of class, I guess. But yeah, so I can relate to that. Maybe that's the reason why we can cope with it better, because we, not that we wanted things to collapse, but we didn't buy into the tech will save us or capitalism will save us in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, it's almost like there's a resigned. Oh yes, everything happened the way that we were always all us leftists were ranting it would happen. And there's not that it's like good that it happened that way, but yeah, you're kind of a little more inured to it because you were expecting it.
But that can lead to apathy and defeatism and go like, okay, F it, I'm just gonna party.
Yeah, finding that balance I think is important, and is probably, I mean, really is probably like the major political project for the left right now. But I won't pretend to have any answers there.
No, you're just right. You're just a professional liar putting stuff out distractions, stuff that distracts us from the real issues. Stella is asking in the local chat, Drax, I was asking about the shift in identity construction in sports and location, like cities or a nation to a corporation. Lincoln's having corporations own sports teams is kind of radical. How was Lincoln inspired to remove how identity was embedded with the team's location to a capitalist industrial corporation? Has the shift already been going on with sports teams all along? I guess, Stella, you're also referring to that the teams can be at any location and they're just not embedded in within a community. They're just commodified entities. I would say that this has been going on for a long time. The Dodgers, and there's a lot of examples. I'm not. Lincoln, go ahead. What would you say to this?
Yeah, well, in the book, it's kind of like a mix. Like the teams still have a location for their stadium, right, where they play their games, but they have more national identities because they're tied to corporations instead. And yeah, that's definitely, it is a shift, but I do think it's also something that's going on now, right? Like on the one hand, you have, something like European soccer leagues will often have corporate sponsors, and right, they have those logos across the chest, and then people, I mean, a lot of my friends follow European soccer leagues. They follow the EPL or so on, and they pick a team to root for that has like branding they like, or whatnot. They have no connection to Chelsea or to Lyon or wherever they're supporting. So I do think that is, an acceleration of what's happening already.
I think what and Jerry is saying, are geographical fans not as important culturally? I would say absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, as Jerry is bringing this up, this reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend about Lufthansa, where I was pissed off that Lufthansa was not nationalized during COVID because the German government gave them, I don't know, several billions, and then Lufthansa fired 10,000 people anyways. Although they said, "Oh, we need the money so that we don't have to fire them." I mean, same story, a different year. And I said we should nationalize it. And my friend said, "Oh, Lufthansa is such an important German institution, and they did some great stuff in the Biafra War." And I go, "Dude, this is an international, you know, corporation that is where the shareholders are interested in maximizing their shares. This has nothing to do with your tiny little, cute little Lufthansa of the 60s. I mean, I think this the same is probably true with sports teams, that they owned by people who have no connection to the local or to the history even of their own team. It's completely commodified. I think we
Yeah.
lost Lincoln.
Can you
Is
hear
he?
me?
Yes, you're back.
Oh, yeah, my Wi-Fi shut down and then I went back on. But I guess the little tech problems are apropos to
That's the
the
deep
book.
state. Alex Jones would. This is the deep state trying to suppress our ideas. Oops, I think Lincoln's Wi-Fi is saying the show ends in 7 minutes. We got to put the pedal to the metal here. Um, Stella is saying there used to be city pride in sports. Yeah, no, I mean, Stella, the way I see it is, again, this is just commodifying something that had local cultural context, and that cultural context, the local context is removed to maximize the profit, and that's not confined to sports. So,
Yeah.
Lincoln, go ahead. Ah, you're back. Yes.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. And in America, it's I can't speak as well for other countries, so it might be the same. But America is such a large country, and the sports teams are all stacked on top of each other in a handful of major cities. And so there's always been this kind of weird nationalization of the sports, in the sense that when Michael Jordan was on the Bulls, like everyone across the country was a Bulls fan.
Hmm.
When they were winning, not literally everyone, obviously, but there was always kind of a national aspect to, or a non-geographic aspect to, sports teams in America. They kind of get marketed everywhere.
Right, but it's still within America. I think we're all talking about the same thing. I mean, this is fascinating. So when we're talking about geography, how big is the geography? Absolutely great point, Lincoln. Again, I would say that that this is a phenomenon that's applicable to some other, or to pretty much everything where the cultural context is removed. Tsai is saying Lufthansa founded 1926, bankrupted after the war, and then a new Lufthansa was founded by people who bought the name. Tsai, but Lufthansa is such a cute airline. Okay, uh, I digress because we're 5 minutes away from having to wrap this show. This was really awesome, Lincoln. Let me check if there's other questions that we might have missed. Oh, Bixel on the YouTube chat is saying if a cowboy duplicated himself, would he be the clone ranger? That is pretty good. That is pretty
I
good.
like a good groaner pun.
We need some sound effects here. We don't have any sound effects. Um, yeah. So what's next now, Lincoln? That you, like I said in the beginning, I Googled you. You were called a short story writer. I'm assuming that Google has to update the description.
Well, yeah, I have. Yeah, before this book, I had a story collection called Upright Beasts, and I still write. I love short stories, and publish them pretty regularly. I've got a couple coming out this year, but I have a new novel that I've finished but haven't sent out to editors yet. So hopefully someone will buy that. That's what I'm kind of tinkering with now, and hopefully we'll send out pretty soon.
Hmm. And we have your short story collection right here on the table. If the camera could just zoom in here a little bit, right here on the table next to the Body Scout. I was going to read the um, oh, I read already the Jonathan Lethem quote, but here's Upright Beasts, and you can get that too. I would like to thank Dr. Setek, Coppelius the Neanderthal, and the spare Zunz in the teleporting machine over there. If people feel like throwing around brains or other organs on the ground, they can do that. These are movable objects. You can pick them up, you can throw them around, and of course, this field of dreams will stay here indefinitely until we dismantle it when William Gibson finally shows up. Um, no, he's not coming. He was in Second Life in 2008, by the way. But in closing, I would. Oh no, we have 3 minutes. No more last questions. We need to honor the time. I would like to thank Lincoln for coming. You're welcome to come back anytime. This is your avatar. You can do what you want. Of course, you'll be monitored by surveillance drones, and all that stuff will be sent to to your publisher. Big thank you to the audience in world and on YouTube. You can rewatch this episode on youtube.com/Draxtor. Please like and subscribe and consider joining the channel. There are a whole bunch of perks. Big thanks again to Kitten Duel who supports this show. Big thanks to Kitten. I hope that Kitten comes in world one of these days. Bixel says on YouTube, clone on the range. Okay, Bixel, it's enough. Monkey did all the research today. Big thanks to Monkey. And Shyla did a bunch of slides, but the big thank you goes to Monkey today. Second Life Book Club every Wednesday, 12 o'clock. Second Life time, slbookclub at dragster.com is the email. And what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Uh, the avatar today was Lincoln's avatar was made by Isabel. The show is produced by Isabel Sharon, Shyla the Super Gecko, and myself. Location manager, master builder is Ruby Geek. Oh, Dr. Setek. Can the camera please go to Dr. Setek, who's drinking? What is he drinking? Some sponsored drink. Who is the sponsored drink maker, Lincoln? Is it Monsanto beer? Dr. Setek, Cyberpunk soda he's drinking. Dr. Setek reminded me to mention the tip jar. The tip jar is right next to the the Janus Club entrance, and please do put your Linden dollars into the tip jar if you appreciate this. This is a volunteer-driven effort, like I said before, and the tips are very, very much appreciated. Again, Linden Lab is giving us these islands for free. I know there's certain rumors going around that they're paying us millions of Linden dollars. No, they don't. They give us the islands, and that's it. So the volunteer team, including Dr. Setek here with his crab legs, again, a big character in Body Scout, is appreciating the tips. slbookclubdraxter.com, Jared the bot, you can send him messages. And lastly, we are going on a summer break. I announced it many times. So the summer break is until the third week in September. I got to look this up myself. The first show is on the 22nd. No, wait a minute, on the 21st with Gabriella Houston. And which means that every Wednesday at the normal time, I will be here in World. We can hang out, but I'm not streaming. So sorry, Kitten, I will not be streaming. I will be coming here at the normal time and hang out for a couple of hours. We can talk about any books that you like. It's an informal chat. So this will be going on, but I will not be streaming. We're back on the 21st. Also, people have asked, are we reading something together? I put the word out, but just like my ratings with Infinite Jest in virtual reality, where the ratings plummeted from 9 to 2, um, my poll numbers of what should we read The Three Body Problem, should we read America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, got I think 9 votes. So I decided that I will just be reading German sci-fi Perry Roden, and if you like to join me, just come on in World every Wednesday. That's it. Any last words, Lincoln? Or we're good. We're good to run.
Oh, just thank you so much for having me. Thanks to everyone listening. And I mean, this set is extremely detailed and amazing. I'm gonna come dip back in here afterwards and play around.
It's a world, Lincoln, and Coppelius is going to run into the Janus Club right now. Oh my God, look, Coppelius is doing it. Coppelius is checking out the Janus Club. That's it, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you, team. Thank you, audience. And see you all next week in World only. Bye bye.
Thank you so much again for having me.